Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
We're discussing chapter 34 of Ship of Destiny, Rescues. Getting close to the end here.
We are.
Kennit has just hopped over to the Jamaillian ship to try to rescue the Satrap. And all of the other ships are like, let's go rescue him.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely I feel like we're at a weird spot with Kennit's character just because in my eyes he's acting kind of weird. I mean, I think he's acting in character. I think his actions make sense in the context of the book. It just doesn't feel like it's normal Kennit, if that makes sense. So this chapter feels weird to me because I'm not quite sure where his head is at. Although I guess I'm never quite sure where Kennit's head is at. So that's not
fair.
That different. But yeah, going into this chapter especially, I feel like I'm not quite sure what's going through his mind.
But
even
just
though we
like
get his
leaping over to save the Satrap, or
just every decision he continues to make in the moment feels very like weird to me. I don't know.
Okay.
But I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe as we go on, I'll be able to like point out specifics.
Well, we start with Brashen, first of all. They're on board the Paragon, obviously, and the Paragon was asking the Vivacia at the end of last chapter where Kennit was, and Vivacia was pointing out, like, hey, they're on a ship up ahead. And Paragon surges past Vivacia. So Brashen, in the beginning of this chapter, is yelling, I don't care about Kennit. Let's go back for Althea. And Paragon's like, no, she's safe right here. I need to get to Kennit.
Right. Kennit is important. I need him.
Brashen is clenching his teeth. He's reflecting in his head. He's kind of crashing about the Althea situation again because like, oh, I'm so close. And every time we get close to being like a normal ship and captain, Paragon dashes my hopes again. So he's thinking this is another turn of the madness of like, of course, there's another something that goes wrong that's preventing me from helping Althea.
Right. He's really taking this super personally. And I guess maybe he didn't see Althea on board. I think we only see from Althea's point of view when he comes that she sees him. But I don't remember there specifically being like they lock eyes and wave across, you know.
Right.
It's more just she sees him running around. So potentially he hasn't even seen her on board Kennit's deck, or I guess the Vivacia. So I can see why he's so upset, but also this feels like a really crazy situation, right? He's sailing in to the Vivacia being attacked by a huge circle fleet from Jamaillian. And
they're
also,
fleeing now, right?
Yes, they're fleeing now. But it is kind of interesting just kind of to see, like, there is a lot going on and Brashen's main focus is still getting to Althea and saving her.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that was their plan going in. Just use all the distractions against one another, grab Althea and leave if they can.
Right.
And now, as he says here, every time Brashen began to trust Paragon, he dashed his hopes again. He defied both rudder and orders, arrowing after the fleeing Jamaillian ship. So he notes that Mother and Amber are also kind of like excited to pursue Kennit and everything. So he's the only one here. He's just like, please, at least slow us down. We don't need to be the only one facing the Jamaillian ships alone. Let the other ships help us.
Right.
And Paragon's like, nah, they'll kill him. They might be killing him right now. He must not die without me. That had an ominous tone. Brashen suddenly felt a light touch on his wrist. He glanced down to find Kennit's mother standing beside him. Her pale eyes locked with his dark ones and spoke all the words her tongue could no longer say. The eloquence of that appeal could not be refused. Brashen shook his head, not at her, but at his own foolishness. Go then, he suddenly shouted at the ship. Fling yourself forward blindly. Satisfy whatever madness drives you once and for all. As I must, Paragon flung back at him. As must we all, Amber agreed quietly. Brashen rounds on Amber because she's someone that he can actually speak to and get straight answers from, I guess.
Kind of.
And says, I suppose this is the destiny you bespoke. And she gave him an ethereal smile. Oh, yes, indeed. And not just Paragon's, mine and yours. and all the worlds.
Yeah, she's acting weird again. It did say earlier in the description that was kind of skipped over that she's looking forward off the head of the bow as though she's listening to a distant music,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a really interesting description of her in this moment, especially because we know that for at least of what we know of B and how she interprets different moments in time when they're happening the way it's supposed to happen on the path, those moments sort of play out in a kind of dreamy way when you're in them.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see Amber going through this moment where it seems as though, from what we can see as readers and rereaders, I suppose, she's also going through this moment specifically in that dreamy sort of things are aligning way that B describes going through. And so I found that really interesting while rereading these books to see those moments like that, because we never really get to be in Beloved's head. And so we don't really know
Right.
what Beloved sees or goes through, but you can kind of guess based off of what we know from B.
And I mean, I kind of equate it to deja vu for us, like
Right, yeah.
I feel like I've had dreams that I don't remember in the moment, like waking up, but a year later, 2 years later, something happens. I'm like, I have seen this before and it feels really weird.
Yeah.
And that must be kind of similar, except the fool / beloved / Amber dreams those things and then tries to make them happen.
Yeah.
So when they happen, that must be really weird.
Yeah, like the overlap of
Yeah.
memory and it actually happening for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. But either way, Brashman's really frustrated. And I don't blame him. Does he know? He has to know at this point that Kennit is related to the Ludlucks, right? Because he went searching.
I was trying to think that too. I think he got it because they told. So Amber did tell him when they were picking up his mom, right? The Ludluck woman.
Yes.
He knows that whole story. But I don't know if he knows the whole thing with Kennit and Paragon. So he knows that he's a family relative, but he doesn't know what they went through as a kid.
Right.
So they don't know he doesn't know the whole extent of like how they're connected, and this might be why Paragon is so kind of crazy and full of trauma.
To be fair, no, definitely not that. But he should know at the very least that Kennit was bonded with the ship because the ship knows his mom.
That's fair.
Like Kennit. Yeah. Obviously, he knows Kennit's mom, and why would you know the mom and not the kid, I guess, especially 40 years ago when Kennit would have been a child.
Yeah, he can make the assumption, but not know for sure. Remember, he's never met Kennit face to face. He doesn't really know how old he is.
No, that's not true. He has met him face to face whenever he came on board and attacked the ship and then almost set it on fire. Did set it on fire.
That's fair. I don't think they ever... Yeah, I guess they never fought, but Brashen surrendered to him.
Yes.
So
they did talk face to face.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess he can assume, but not know for sure.
True. But I guess, he doesn't know the history. He doesn't know why Paragon would be so desperate. And I mean, even if he does know the history, he knows the last time he was on Paragon, he tried to sink Paragon and light him on fire. So it probably doesn't make sense to him that Paragon would still want to save Kennit in this moment.
It's another flash of badness, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's just an interesting little thing here where poor Brashen once again is steamrolled by fate and can't do what he wants to do.
We switch over to Kennit's point of view, who is captured at the moment.
Yes.
He and the Satrap have been captured, and they're the only two left alive of everyone who had made it over to that ship. Kennit is crutchless, weaponless, and he sat on the deck while working sailors moved matter-of-factly past him. He says he has never been in a worse place. The Satrap was a crumpled heap behind him. He was uninjured but swooned. Kennit himself was battered, but as yet unbloodied. So they were sitting on the open deck near the house of the ship. He can look up at his guards if he wants to because they're standing right there, but he refuses to acknowledge them. he's trying to put on an air that he is important and he's going to be rescued and that sort of thing.
Right.
It's
And
kind of,
yes, also they are really annoying to him because they're sneering at him and looking down on him, and he could tell how much joy they got out of taking his crutch away and watching him fall.
yep.
So he's just sort of trying to muster this attitude of not caring, even though he's seething on the inside.
Where had his good luck vanished? How could this have happened to him, King Kennit of the Pirate Isles? But a moment ago, he'd held the satrap of all Jamaillia captive and had the signed treaty that recognized him as king of the Pirate Isles. He had felt his destiny, had briefly touched it. Now this. He had not been so helpless and defeated since he was a boy. He pushed the thought aside. None of this would have happened if Wintrow and Etta had followed him as they should have. Their courage and faith in his luck should have matched his own. He'd tell them so when they rescued him. So he still is supremely confident that he's going to be rescued because that's who Kennit is.
Right.
And he, of course, going back to, the first book that we've seen, has to blame others as well for his rash decisions or things that go wrong.
Right. And I think it's interesting here that we see that it is both Kennit or both Etta and Wintrow's fault to Kennit. And I think normally he puts a lot of blame on one or the other, although not often Wintrow, but still, he sort of like picks one of them. But it's interesting in this moment that it's both of their fault.
Right.
And I guess maybe because they didn't follow him, I'm not sure. But yeah, he's definitely not taking kindly to the fact that he's not doing well now. But I think it's interesting that he says, "Where has my luck gone?" But he's still trusting the luck. He's still trusting that he will be rescued. He's not going to be here very much longer.
Mm-hmm. Because it's his destiny,
Exactly.
So he can hear and sees the satrap kind of stirring and waking up, and Kennit is whispering commands at him to, stop whining, sit up, look commanding. Now more than ever, you must be the satrap of all Jamaillia. Look like a king if you wish to be treated as one. Sit up. Be alert and outraged. Behave as if you have the power to kill them all. And Kennit remarks to himself that he's already taking his own advice.
He also commented earlier, like the first nudge, because he has two nudges to talk to the satrap. He says, "The more weakness you admit, the more they'll hurt you. I need you in one piece." But I think that little line there, "the more weakness you admit, the more they'll hurt you," is really interesting because it really shows how Kennit walks in the world.
Yeah.
Like, I think he truly believes that about everyone, not just this situation.
No, it's true.
And so
that's how he grew up too.
Yeah. Like, you can't show weakness. That just brings hurt. And so in this moment, I think this is one of those moments that feels a little strange to me, that he's helping the satrap. Although I get that obviously he needs the satrap to be important to help his own importance, sort of like Malta's situation.
Yeah.
Where, it's sort of a theater where if you act like you're important and you act like the person you're with is important, but they don't, it kind of doesn't give you as much standing. So I get it. This is one of those moments that feels a little bit weird to me, where I'm sort of like, where is his head at? What is going on? Because it does feel really vulnerable.
Yeah. He does kind of explain it a little bit afterwards, right? Like he says, or he thinks that they both still lived meant that the satrap had some living value to them. And if the satrap had some living value and was able to get out of it alive, Kennit helping him might save Kennit's life.
Right. No, definitely. It just feels oddly kind, which is funny to say because he is kind of being mean to the satrap. Obviously, he's like, "Stop being a sniveling baby."
But he's giving him advice.
But he is helping him. He is giving him real advice.
Yeah.
And he's talking to him like an adult to another adult, which I feel the satrap doesn't really get a lot of in his life.
Right.
And it is coming from somebody, I guess Kennit's older than the satrap, but I don't know that the satrap has really had much experience with older men in general, which he seems to have more respect for, talking to him in the way that Kennit does. And it really does
As an
help
equal
him.
rather than
Yes. Rather than, your most beautiful majesty, we
Right.
love you so much, you can do no wrong. Somebody actually trying to help him with authority. I think that's pretty big for him.
Yeah, for sure. So Kennit advises the satrap to look around at the crew and imagine how the satrap's going to kill them. You know, just to like basically the whole you're speaking in front of everybody, picture everybody in their underwear or something so you don't
Right.
feel as nervous.
Pirate version.
Exactly, the pirate version, the version of the leaders to make them look imperious and imposing and angry at being captured, and how dare they. So the satrap is like, slowly they will die slowly, and he, you know, sits up and he is a little bit more confident in himself and looking around. And Kennit reflects that anger looks good on him. It makes him look more commanding and more like an adult rather than a petulant, whiny child that he normally has on his face.
True. Well, I think there is a difference between anger and whining, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you can be upset that your situation is bad and then, like, seem like you're just whining about something that doesn't matter. But you can be upset and then angry about the situation. And
Yeah.
I feel like people take that a little bit more seriously than
Mhm.
whenever you're just like, I don't like where I'm at. So
True,
you're like, I can't believe I'm here. Just different vibe.
The satrap is going on his tirade of what he's going to do to everyone, how he's going to kill them and all their families and burn their fields. And to the 10th generation, they will suffer for this. I know their names. And the guard overhears him and kind of like nudges him and says, like, quiet down. You're going to be dead before the end of the day, basically.
I heard them say it.
Yep. They just want to do it where they can all witness it. Binding by blood, they call it. You too, King Kennit. Maybe they'll let me do it. I lost 2 shipmates to those damn serpents of yours. Kennit! The roar was the voice of the wind itself, the cry of an outraged god. The taunting guard spun around to look aft. A terrible shiver ran over Kennit. He did not have to look. It was the voice of his dead ship, calling him to join it. He struggled to stand, but without his crutch it was hard. Help me up, he commanded the satrap. At any other time, the royal youth would probably have disdained such a command, but the sound of the pirate's name still lingered in everyone's ears. He stood quickly and extended a hand to the pirate. Even the men on deck had slowed in their appointed tasks to look back. A look of horror dawned on some faces. Kennit hauled himself to standing position by the satrap's slender shoulder and stared wildly about for the ghost ship. Impossibly, it was Paragon, transfigured in death to a youth. A ghostly white serpent gamboled before the ship, more swift than the wind, unnaturally fleet. The live ship drew alongside. Completing the nightmare, his mother stood on the foredeck. She reached a beseeching hand toward him. A golden goddess stood beside her, and a dead man commanding the crew. Kennit's tongue clove for an instant to the roof of his mouth. The ghosts of his past came on, impossibly swift, drawing abreast of the Jamaillian ship and then veering toward it. Kennit! The voice thundered again. I come for you! Paragon put cold fury in his voice. Yield Kennit to me! I command it! He is mine! Yield! Vivacia's voice cracked the sky, coming from the port side. Yield, Jamaillian ship, or we take you to the bottom. And they kind of ram into the Jamaillian ship.
Yeah. So,
man, this is a very interesting passage for a couple reasons. One, because Kennit sees Paragon changed, he sees his mother and thinks it's a nightmare. But he also describes Amber as a golden goddess.
yeah.
When a lot of other people think she is very boy-like and man-like and hard plains.
Yeah.
We've already noted that before, that Etta is similar to,
Yes.
with similar descriptions.
Yeah, it is really interesting to get different people's point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I guess, Kennit, who has what you could consider unconventional tastes for the world.
Yeah.
Although, I don't know, Wintrow also has a crush on Etta, so she
Yeah.
can't be ugly. Not that I guess Amber's ugly, but It's really interesting, like you said, how some people describe her more as just like, you know, boyish and plain and just
I think
there's
Althea describes her like that.
yeah, there's really this like androgynous air about Amber, but then yeah, Kenneth's like golden goddess, you've come.
And I think Fitz describes Beloved with like beautiful descriptors as well, quite
Yeah.
often.
To be fair, I think Fitz describes yeah, beautiful, but especially more like feminine descriptors.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, it's really interesting where we have Althea doing the opposite
Hmm.
especially when the fool is dressed as a woman. So I don't know. Very interesting. All the perspectives. But yes, we have Kennit who is kind of struggling. And I think from this moment on, it really, like, his actions really take a pitch in a weird direction. I think he's really caught off guard by Paragon, and he seems to truly believe that Paragon died. Like,
Yeah,
the Paragon side of things is a ghost ship,
right.
and Vivacia is alive.
And that's Vivacia's the savior, right? Because he
yes.
keeps saying like Vivacia will save me. We'll have to get to Vivacia.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so I find that aspect really interesting because we do like Paragon is real, and I guess he left while Paragon was pretty certain to die. But it's odd to me that he can't accept that Paragon didn't die.
I mean, it's kind of amazing to have a carver of that skill aboard
Yeah.
the ship and be able to reshape them and still talk, because no one knew if that was possible to
Yeah,
reshape
true.
a live ship.
True. And I guess he absolutely is not expecting his mother.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So in this specific situation, it makes sense that he would be so surprised and shocked
Mhm.
and convinced that this is death coming for him. Like that's what death looks like to him, is his ship.
Yeah.
And it's sad and a little poetic as well that he believes that that's a sign that his death is coming, is that his ship is back.
Hmm.
I don't know.
So as I mentioned, both of the ships kind of plow into the Jamaillian ship, which stops the momentum of all three. It's a very dangerous maneuver that could sink all three, possibly, but obviously the Wizardwood is extremely tough and holds up. Sailors on every deck are roaring in dismay over it.
And it's especially bad, not just from the damage to the hulls that could be taken, but there's also the rigging that can be tangled.
Yeah.
And if that happens, there's no way to separate between. So that's a big danger right now. And people are on all of the ships, like you said, are not happy.
Yeah. But Kennit is, he's very good under pressure. So everything is still shuddering, impacts are happening, grapples from both live ships are seizing onto the Jamaillian ship, and even the serpent added to the trumpeting and the shouts from everything around, so it's chaos all of a sudden. And the captors were suddenly intent on defending their own lives, so Kennit, with his calm head, says, Satrap, we have to get to Vivacia. They're saving us. We gotta go.
Right.
I'll guide you there.
So even in his own surprise and fear, he is able to make a decision.
Yeah.
Not only make a decision, but make a decision that aims for the safety of both himself and the satrap. Obviously, he needs the satrap alive. But I mean, I think it does show, as much as I dislike Kennit, he is really good under pressure. He is clearly
He's
meant to be a
fantastic leader. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he doesn't let this situation, even though it's clearly shaking him, he doesn't let it shake his decision making.
Right.
And I think that's a pretty big skill to have, because a lot of people freeze.
Mhm.
And Kenneth's taking action. He's saying, let's go. But unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy, because someone shouts out to kill them. It was the Jamaillian's captain. And he said, by Lord Kraith's order, they must not be taken alive. Kill the satrap and the pirate king. Don't let them escape.
And then we jump back over to Malta's point of view, who was on board Vivacia during the chaos of that fighting, saw Reyn go down under a tangle of bodies, and is just trying to struggle her way over to Reyn's fallen body. And it's very slow moving, because there's a bunch of rubble, debris, dead bodies, and blood that has not soaked in and is beating on the wizardwood deck, making everything slippery,
Yes.
which is a very interesting description as well. I say interesting a lot, but Vivacia is rejecting all of the blood, it seems.
Yes, she's not absorbing the blood that from the fight. And there's also the mention that Wintrow is shouting orders. So this is, as we said before, he's taking over command.
Yep.
And he does it really well and naturally, but he is taking over command, and Malta is so absorbed that she just kind of notices that he's yelling, but isn't
That's
paying
it.
attention to what he's saying or what the people around her are doing.
So we had a conversation last chapter discussion
Yes.
about Reyn saying like, oh, Malta didn't even give a word of greeting to me. And now we have Malta in her head going like, Reyn had come all this way seeking her, and she had been too cowardly to give him even a word. She had dreaded the pain of his rejection so much that she had not had the courage to thank him. Now she feared she sought for a dead man.
Right.
So in Malta's point of view, she also could have.
No, I disagree. Because
Interesting.
I don't think this is her admitting she had time to go thank him. I think this is her reaction to when they met face to face and she ran away. She didn't even have the courage to stand there in that moment and at least say thank you before walking away. She just ran. I don't think this is admittance that there was time for her to have gone away. Like in my reading of it.
You don't think that's what Reyn was thinking about either? Where she was right there. She didn't even say hi to me.
Okay, touche. That could be how it's. For some reason, whenever I read it, I feel like Reyn was upset that she had not sought him out after everything had went down. She had not tried to find him. He didn't understand that she had been called for the satrap at first and then was told that and thought it was an excuse. So in my head, he thinks that there was all this time and she could have come talk to me. And in my head, Malta's thinking, the one chance I had to say anything to him, I fled, if that makes sense. So like,
I think it's about the same situation in my head. I think Robin Hobb's doing the thing that she's been doing with those two all along, where they both think the same thing about the same stuff, and they're both just not communicating, and it's supposed to be
absolutely
comedic irony.
Yeah, fair.
Well, she does eventually reach Reyn, and he is face down, and she's pulling bodies off of him and kind of tugging him over, and she's sobbing breathlessly because no one, not her brother, not her aunt, came to her aid. But he did, and he's probably dead now. So she's like, in all of this chaos, Reyn came and I didn't even say hi, and now he's dead and I'm alone forever.
Right. And she's crying while trying to get...
She flips him over and there's a bunch of blood on his shirt.
Yes.
Oh, Reyn, oh my love. She squeezed out the hoarse words that had lived unacknowledged in her heart since their first dream box sharing. Heedless of the blood, she bent to embrace him. He was still warm. Never to be, never to be. It was like losing her home and her family all over again. In his arms, she suddenly knew, was the only place where she could have been Malta again. With him died her youth, her beauty, her dreams. You're over there tearing up, and I'm being like, she's so dramatic. Like, this is crazy.
I'm literally re-crying listening to you read that. I cried the first time I read it. I cry every time I read this. And that is despite the fact that I think it's so dumb that she's like, the unspoken truth that he's my love since our first dream box sharing. She did not love him when they first met. She did not even like him. He was just another option to toy with. Mm-hmm. You cannot convince me it was love from the beginning. I will not believe it. However, it is a beautiful little speech, and the whole like, that's my home and I've lost it. I'm like tearing up talking about it. I think that's such a real feeling in love. I feel like it's really well captured, this feeling of like, that person is the one who knows me for who I am. Luke's giving me hand hearts. But that's the person that knows me for who I am, and that's home, and they're gone. And I think we've seen that obviously throughout this story with Althea and with Brashen and with even Kefria and
It's a big theme of
yeah.
what actually is home. And
Yes.
if your physical home is destroyed, do you still have home? And,
Yeah, what does that-
finding their place of comfort in the world.
Yeah,
right?
and
All the
also-
characters go through that.
Yeah, and finding love and despite, and then having that love cut short, or thinking that you're having that love cut short. And I think that emotion is really well done to me, clearly, as I'm literally crying in the moment. But I don't know. I just for some reason, whenever Althea and Brashen went through it, it wasn't as emotional to me. And I think it's because, well, maybe because I know that they're fine. I know Reyn's fine, but maybe because they're crying and being upset and hurting and longing for this home that's lost, when as a reader, that other person is totally fine and they're just in a different area of the sea. Whereas here, Malta is looking at what she thinks to be her loved one's dead body and going through that. And for some reason that makes it more touching or something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. For some reason, this one really gets me. And I think it's just a really good encapsulation of that theme that we've been seeing throughout of home is more the people that accept you than a physical place.
And Malta peels away his veil, slowly untucks it, and then finally kisses him as she says, bent down and kissed his still mouth, lips to lips, no dream, no veil between them. Dimly she was aware that the shouting world of sail and battle went on around them. She did not care. Her life had stopped here. She traced the scale line of his brow, the pebbled skin like a finely wrought chain under her fingertips. Reyn, she said quietly, oh my Reyn.
And then he pops his eyes open just to peek.
Yeah. He blinked twice, then opened his eyes. He squinted up at her. He gave a gasp of pain, his right hand going to the wet sleeve of his left arm. I'm hurt, he said dazedly. She bent closer over him. Her heart thundered in her ears. She scarcely heard her own words. Reyn, lie still. You're bleeding badly. Let me see to you. With competence she did not feel, she began to undo his shirt. She would not dare to hope. She hoped for nothing. No, she did not even dare to pray. Not that he would live. Not that he would love her. Such hopes were too big. She tore the shirt and spread it wide, expecting ruin within. You're whole, she exclaimed. Pray soft for life. She ran a wondering hand down his smooth bronze chest. The scaling on it rippled under her hand and glinted in the pale winter sunlight. And now he's like, Malta? Is that you? So he was really knocked out.
Yeah, he did not get this whole Little Mermaid kiss in the where he's half awake. He has no memory of this moment. At least while he's trying to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, you can really feel it's so funny because when we go over to Malta's point of view, cutting from this big action happening to Kennit and Satrap, their lives are in danger. And my initial reaction as a reader was come on, we don't need the romance right now. But then obviously as it keeps going, I'm like, okay, we did need the romance. I do want to see this. I need their homecoming, so to speak. I need them to get this misunderstanding out of the way. And so I think it's funny that as it goes on, it's more okay, what's gonna happen, what's he gonna do, but I guess I am a romance lover, so I'm kind of here for any and all romance. And I don't know, so Malta is really trying hard to not hope for anything. She doesn't want to be hurt again, and I think that would be the ultimate hurt, right? She's finally admitted out loud how she's feeling, because she has said, she didn't even admit this to herself, that she does love Reyn. She does want him. Now she's done that, and it will be even more hurtful if he sees the changes she's gone through and hates her.
Right.
Right? Like, it's going to be so much more devastating now.
And even from her point of view, as she is observing Reyn, we know what's going through his head because it's been, hammered into us on his points of view over and over.
Yes.
So he says Malta and opens up his eyes, and his bloody right hand caught both of hers and held her touch away from him as his eyes fixed on her brow. And then his eyes widen and he drops his hands down. And Malta, of course, is extremely hurt. Shame and pain scorched through her, but she's not looking away. As if he could not resist the impulse, he lifted a hand. But he did not touch her cheek as she had hoped. Instead, his fingers went straight to her bulging scar and traced it through her hair. Tears burned her eyes. So there we see Reyn being like, okay, I'm grabbing your hands, don't touch me because I'm hideous and Scale the monster.
Don't touch my hideous scales.
And then he sees her crowning because he's seen that in Elderling tapestries and stuff, and drops his hand in surprise like, oh my God. Oh my saw.
Oh my saw.
How did this happen? You are Elderling already. Like, we can be Elderlings together. That's great. But Malta sees him and feels him touching her scar, and she's like, oh my gosh, he hates me. I'm so ugly.
He didn't want me to touch him.
Yes.
He's throwing my hands aside from him, and he can't even help but look at this horrible scar, which, to be fair to her, is everyone's reaction. They all stare.
True.
So it's not like...
Hey, everyone thinks he's subhuman.
Yeah, true. So like, I get it. I get that she doesn't understand that he's looking at her with kindness, especially because there seems to be a lack of that towards Malta at the moment. And
Right.
So I think it's really interesting to have these little like misunderstandings building up until the big reveal. But he says that she's crowned.
Yeah. But how can this be? Crested like the ancient Elderling queen in the old tapestries, the scaling is just beginning to show scarlet. Oh, my beauty, my lady, my queen, Tintaglia was right. You are the only one fit to mother such children as we shall make. His words made no sense, but she did not care. There was acceptance in his face, and awe. His eyes wandered endlessly over her face in wonder and delight. Your brows, too, even your lips, you're beginning to scale. Help me up. I must see all of you. I must hold you and know this is real. I've come so far and dreamed of you so often. She's like, well, you're hurt though. And he's like, no, not much of it is mine. I think I only got stabbed through my left arm. That's about it. We're good. I was stunned.
I merely hurt all over. It's fine.
And then he's rising up and all of a sudden he's like, my veil. And he looked down at her. She had not thought such joy could shine on a man's face. You will marry me then? He asked in delighted disbelief, because remember, their conversation was like, you're not going to see me unveiled until you agree to marry me.
Yes, and she hadn't agreed yet.
Yep.
So.
And she says, if you'll have me as I am. She stood straight, chose truth. She could not let him plunge into this blindly, not knowing what others might later whisper about his bride. Reyn, there is much that you first need to know about me. And at that instant, Vivacia shouted something about yielding, and then they crash into the ship, and they're tumbling all around, and Reyn's crying out in pain, rolled to throw himself protectively over her, so it's a whole big mess. And as there's the chaos happening of everyone shouting in the battle of trying to kill the Jamaillians, the Jamaillians trying to kill Kennit and the Satrap, he shouts by her ear, the only thing I need to know is that I have you now.
I'm tearing up. I think it's so cute and sweet. I love that they've been together. And what a 180 for me for
Right.
I was team anti-Malta and especially anti-Reyn and Malta. And it is still weird. Obviously, we don't need to go over that point. But it is a book. It's fantasy. They're not real people. I'm for it. I think that they deserve each other. They're both so equally dramatic and romantic, and I don't know, I think this moment is really cute to me because they like truly do care about each other, and I think both have been needing someone to accept them for who they are.
Yeah.
And they have that, and I think that's really sweet.
Their story is so similar to like fairy tales to me.
Yeah.
Where it's with like old fairy tales.
Yeah.
With like the inner beauty story kind of thing shining through, where Malta would be the spoiled brat who's like, oh no, you're a hideous monster.
Yes.
But falls in love with this secret person and it happens to be the hideous monster. And then she turns into a hideous monster. Yeah, you know, they live happily ever after.
It's basically Shrek. But I mean, Shrek 1 actually though, like
kind of
low-key. Yeah, so I think it's really cute. I'm glad that
she could go with Satrap Farquaad, you know?
Yes, she could.
Alternate view.
No. So I think it's really sweet that they have talked to each other, and I think it's especially sweet that Reyn is, without knowing it, right? He is sort of soothing her worst fears. He's calling her beautiful. He's saying that she's a majestic and a queen. And it's sort of like the way you treat a dragon, where you give them all this praise and it helps their self-esteem. And that is helping Malta. And maybe it's shallow. She's also like 14, so who cares? But also, I don't think it's shallow to want the person that you love to think that you're beautiful.
Right.
And I think that it doesn't matter that other people don't think she's beautiful, because the person she cares about thinks she is. And that's what she's caring about in this moment. And I don't know. I just think it's really nice. I think it's sweet.
Also, I want to point out that her brow and her lips were scaling as well. And I believe her fingers are as well, because we talked about how like chapped everything was and like it was kind of rough skin.
Yeah, she says later there's another
that Reyn thinks I'm going to be heavily clawed, you know?
So
and she's like, isn't that cool?
She's very excited. But I find it interesting about her face, because I don't think it really mentions that the rest of her face is looking rough at all.
She talks about her mouth, her like lips and around her mouth before.
Okay.
But not her brow specifically, because she always just mentions her scar.
Yeah, that's fair. She could obviously miss it in light of that. But yeah, really interesting. Also interesting to know that her little head growth thing is normal for elderlings, or not normal, but something that happened to elderlings.
Yeah, Tintaglia explains it later as well, that it is still rare in elderlings, but it is a thing that happens, or it can happen.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to be really honest. I think the only reason it did happen is because she did have that wound to begin with. I think if she wouldn't have gotten hurt on her forehead at all, it would not have happened.
Yeah.
I think it's the fact that while it was healing, it was influenced by a dragon.
Yeah, so thank you, Devad Restart.
Yeah, shout out to Devad. He's really helping Malta here.
Yeah. And we jump over to Althea's point of view. And the first thing that we see from her point of view is her praising Wintrow.
Yeah, Wintrow knew how to command.
Yeah, amidst all else, as Althea scrambled to his orders with the others, she saw the sense of them. She saw something else, something even more important than whether she approved of how he ran his deck. The crew was confident in him. Jola, the mate, did not question his competence or his authority to take over for Kennit. Neither did Etta. Vivacia put herself in his hands without reservations. Althea was aware, jealously, of the exchange between Vivacia and Wintrow. Effortless as water, it flowed past her. Naturally, without effort, they traded encouragement and information. They did not exclude her. It simply went past her the way adult conversation went over a child's head. So she is sitting there jealous because she doesn't have a deep connection with Vivacia anymore. And
Wintrow's kind of doing what she couldn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's taking over and the entire crew is listening. And I think in a way that is exactly what Althea had dreamed of. She dreamed of that moment for her where she can take over the ship and everybody just listens and she's good at it and it makes sense. And here's Wintrow doing that. That's Wintrow on Vivacia. And not only are Wintrow and Vivacia working together, but the whole crew is working with them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes on to talk about how she's also shocked by this because both herself and her father had overlooked this potential in Wintrow.
Yeah.
And even Kyle overlooked it. Like, Kyle was only putting him there temporarily. Everybody knew that. It's Kennit who saw this in
Kennit,
Wintrow.
the rapist, had somehow been also the leader that Wintrow near worshipped and the mentor who had enabled him to take his place on this deck and command it. So she's going through a lot of emotions right now because she's also driven by the need not just to kill Kennit, but to expose him.
Yeah.
And reveal him to everybody. She wanted to tear his followers' love and loyalty away from him the way he had torn her dignity and privacy from her body. She wanted to do to him what he had done to her, take from him something he could never regain, leave him always crippled in a way that did not yield to logic. She did not want to hurt those two, her nephew and her ship, but no matter how much she cared for both of them, she could not walk away from what Kennit had done to her.
And I think this is a really interesting look into Althea and what she's struggling with, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it is really hard to acknowledge that bad people are still people and can do good things. They can be good at things even. And it is really struggling for Althea in this moment to realize that not only did somebody see what Wintrow had inside him all along and nurture it, but it was Kennit of all people. And it doesn't make her like him less or more or whatever. She still wants to take him down, but she recognizes that also will take down something for the ship and Wintrow.
It gives her a little bit more perspective of why those people might still have lingering, confusion about their feelings about Kennit.
Yeah. And it really helps to, like widen the scope of what she knows.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, for Althea, she almost drowned and then was locked in a room, right? She didn't get to see, before everything that happened to her, what Kennit did on the ship, how he acted. I mean, she had heard rumors about him, right? She knows that everybody thinks this is the best guy in the entire world.
She thought he was going to be a pretty good guy too.
Also that. It just, like, she had never seen him in the context of what his relationship was with Wintrow or Vivacia without a lens of hatred over it. And, like, she just didn't get that. And so I think this is really interesting because it does break into that hatred of Kennit to give her more of a wide view.
Yeah.
And it's not as tainted with that hate. And so, I don't know. I just think that's really interesting, that little thing that's given to her here. But she also, it kind of doesn't matter because he's still awful. And
yeah, and her mind kind of shifts to Brashen, thinking about the reaction that he might have, because it almost hurts worse that Brashen is alive now. Because would Brashen even grasp the whole of it, she asks. She was not sure what she feared most, that he would be enraged by it, as if Kennit had stolen from him, that he might spurn her as dirtied, or that he might dismiss it as a bad experience that she would get over. And not knowing how he would react, she suddenly feared that she did not know him at all. The open love and trust between Brashen and her was, in some ways, still new and fresh. Could it bear the weight of this truth? And that's another thing that she's angry at Kennit for, possibly destroying this.
Right.
But, I mean, I understand why she goes to all these negative thoughts, but at the same time, they're all negative reactions.
Yes.
She just doesn't fathom a world where anybody can just continue to accept and love her.
Yeah. Well, I think this is kind of the hard part about grief and just bad things in general, right? Like, the reaction that you need whenever you are going through grief, whether that's from the death of a loved one or
loss of autonomy,
or, being the thing that made you into a victim. Like, that's different for everybody. Everybody needs something different. But I think it is really a real feeling of seeing all the bad reactions that have already happened and that will happen, especially since Althea has experienced this before, unfortunately, and not seeing what you need that it makes sense that, like, in some ways I feel like you don't always know what you need. You just know what you definitely don't need. And so it's easier to focus on those things probably happening
Yeah.
than this magical, mystical, perfect response, because I don't know that there is a perfect response.
Right.
But there are responses that are better than others. And I think I kind of appreciate Hobb for laying out those reactions as all being bad. Like, especially the first of Brashen Brashen being upset that as though something was taken from him, because
Yeah.
I think that's really easy to do in this sort of a situation and to accidentally misconstrue. And he might not even mean it that way, but like he could accidentally give that impression. And so I think it's really interesting to have that as something that, like, this is something that people don't think about as well with the topic of rape, that there are other, like, oh, what is it called? Waves to what has
Yeah.
happened. It's not just the event and the
Right.
initial reaction. It's also
Mhm.
every other time you have to tell somebody that you care about. Like,
Yeah.
it just continuously ripples out into your life. And I think it's really well done that we still have these ripples appearing.
Yeah, for sure. At least for now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And then there was no time to think anymore because someone shouted brace and there was a great crunch and she kind of realized belatedly, oh, that was meant as a warning. And then she was mad at Wintrow for having Vivacia crash into the deck in the ship. And then she realizes that no, Wintrow minimized everything he could because Vivacia chose this path. And then they were jumping over the side on the deck to fight, and all of a sudden she was jumping over too. It's all kind of back to back, it's all crazy. And all of a sudden next to her, Jack appears and says, "Think if I save the satrap, he'll marry me? I'd fancy being a satrapess," or whatever she's called. So yeah, jumping over to fight, and she's looking around for her nephew, for Wintrow, trying to protect him or fight next to him at least. And she asks, "What was that?" as something rocks the deck and sends everyone staggering. And then there's a frenzied shout from a sailor that kind of answers her, yelling at the Jamaillian captain that the serpent has torn their rudder free and they're taking on water bad. So the Jamaillian ship is going to sink.
Yes. And Jack responds with, "We better come what we came for, or take what we came for and get off this tub."
Yeah, exactly. And Althea is following on Jack's heels as she's going into the melee. And Jack says, "I thought I saw Etta. Ah, here we are." And then, "Saw's breath and Elle's balls. They're down and bloody, both of them."
I just want to quick say, I find it really interesting that Jack says L's balls, because that is such a Six Duchies curse.
Yeah.
But she does start with the Bingtown Saw's
Saw's
breath.
Hey, that's what sailors do, right? They learn curse words from all over and
That's
just kind
true.
of.
That's true. That's the trope.
That is the trope.
But I thought that was a really nice little detail of L's balls, because we have not heard that one in a while.
Yeah.
So shout out Jack for bringing us a little taste of home.
So we're back with Kennit, and he has to commend the Jamaillian captain for teaching his crew to obey all of his commands without question, because the crew immediately turns on them to try to kill them both.
And they don't care what's going on. They're
Yep.
following commands. So if it was not directed against him, he would like it a lot more. However, it is currently directed against him, and he is fighting for his life as well as the life of the satrap.
Yeah, because evidently the satrap either had to be in the Jamaillian's control or dead. So Kennit's estimation of the satrap's value is skyrocketing. He's like, okay, so he's super, super important. I knew he
Right.
was before, but now I'm going to keep him alive and in my own control.
And then they're going to pay me even more than I even thought they would.
Yeah, to get him back. You know, like I'm not going to deliver him to Jamaillia. I'm going to keep him in my control. So he commands the satrap, "Get behind me." He's like, "I only need to hold him off for a few minutes, and then Etta and Wintrow will come and save me. It's fine." He's going to try to protect the satrap. His body shielded the cowering Magnadon. With his free hand, Kennit tore his cloak loose. The oncoming men didn't pause. He foiled the first man's thrust by flinging his cloak around the blade as it came in and shoving it aside. He tried to grab for it, risking that he could wrench it loose from the owner's grip, but it slipped out from the folds of the heavy cloak. The second man was a big, beefy fellow, more blacksmith than swordman. Without finesse or pretense, he stepped up and thrust his heavy blade through Kennit and into the satrap. The blade pinned them together. "Got 'em both!" His killer's striped shirt was stained with grease, Kennit noted in shock. The man wrenched his blade back out of them and turned to face the boarding parties. Kennit and the satrap fell together. So Kennit, as he's falling, is like, I still can't believe this just happened.
Yeah, this is, I think, really interesting because it doesn't sort of feel a fitting end for Kennit, right? Like, he's weaponless, powerless. He's not successful in his attempt to get a weapon in his first fight. And then the man who takes him down does it without any finesse. He's wearing a grubby, dirty shirt.
Yeah.
This is not some brave, beautiful battle that is what the Pirate King deserves.
Right.
This is
the reality.
This is real life. This is just a quick little in and out by some grubby dude that probably hasn't showered in months. And Kennit is sort of just in disbelief. He cannot believe this is happening to him. And I think not just even the details of it, but the fact that he would die. He can't die.
Right. Yeah.
He's too lucky for that. That's not his story. He's supposed to get out of this successfully and have another feat under him. And he just can't grasp that this is happening, you know? And so as he's going down, he's talking about how it just seems like things are going in slow motion. It's taking forever to fall, even as he's falling. And he has, I don't know, he's just like sort of being taken back to a place he doesn't want to be. He's tasting blood. And the last time that happened was with Ygritte.
Yeah. Ygritte had loved to backhand him, the taste of blood in his mouth, always the forerunner to worse pain. He hears himself call out, "Paragon, I'm hurt, ship, I'm hurt." "Keep breathing, Kennit." The tiny voice from his wrist was urgent, almost panicked. "Hang on, they're almost here. Keep breathing." Stupid charm. He was breathing, wasn't he? Unhappily, he turned his eyes down. With every heavy breath, he spattered blood from his lips. His fine white shirt was ruined. Etta would make him a new one. He tasted blood. He smelled it. Where was Paragon? Why didn't he take this pain? He tried to summon him by speaking his ship's old words for him. "Keep still, boy," he whispered to himself, as Paragon had always done. "Keep still. I'll take it for you. Give it all to me. Just worry about yourself." "He's alive!" someone cried. He rolled his eyes up to the speaker, praying for his deliverance, but the face that looked down at him was Jamaillian, and then basically says, "You didn't even kill him," and stabs him again. "Got him that time." The satisfaction in the voice followed Kennit down into the darkness.
Yeah.
Then we switch over to Wintrow, who thinks they're too late.
Yes. This is honestly pretty sad. I mean,
yeah, of course.
Obviously, having gone from Althea's perspective, where she is still dealing with what he did to her and is still, you know, sort of struggling with that hatred, who has still come to his rescue. I mean, she's still part of the rescue party. And then going into this moment where he's decided to save the satrap because it will get him something. He's not doing this out of the kindness of his heart. He's doing this to gain something, and that something is money and power. And he's excited about that aspect. And then all of a sudden, he's dying. He has been defeated. And in that pain and memory of blood, he reverts into the little boy that was hurt by Ygritte. And I think that's so interesting. I think that's such an interesting choice for Hobb to have made in this moment of where we don't really even like the guy anymore, but you can also kind of feel that sorrow and see more of what happened. I mean, you have here in his worst moment and where he's dying, and he is barely conscious of what's happening. He's searching for Paragon.
Searching for comfort.
He wants that comfort. He wants Paragon. And not only is he just searching for Paragon because he loves Paragon, I don't think it's necessarily what that is. It's more the habit of this level of pain causing him to go to a habit of asking Paragon to take that pain.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a sadder realization.
Yeah, for sure.
That like him tasting blood and being this level of pain is like, I'm not going to die because Paragon's going to take the pain and it'll all be done. And I think that also is sort of an answer as to why he thinks he has so much luck and why he acts as though he cannot die. Because in a way he can't. I mean, before this, when he was with Paragon, he couldn't.
Right. Yeah.
And so why would you be afraid of death when you've faced it so many times and been fine?
Oh, we jump over to Wintrow's point of view and without thought, without remorse, kills the man who just killed his captain. And Etta springs past him and is like, we can save him, while Wintrow knows that they can't. There's too much blood, it's dark and thick. Even when they pick him up, putting the arms around each of their necks, and he doesn't make a noise, Wintrow's like, Kennit is gone.
Yeah. Even though he's breathing, even though he is technically still alive, he's gone.
Yeah.
It's done.
They had to hurry. The Jamaillians had been beaten back, but not for long. The satrap was underneath Kennit. As they lifted him off, the satrap spasmed into life, screaming and rolling himself into a ball. No, don't kill me, don't kill me. He looked like a child hiding under his blankets with the voluminous red cloak. What a nuisance, Wintrow muttered to himself and then bit his tongue, scarcely believing he had uttered such words. They start back to the ship and says, someone bring the satrap. And Jack bounded past him from the edge of the group, and stooping, she picks up the satrap and shifts him over her shoulder and says, let's go.
Yep.
Hoping for the satrapess title.
Yes. Althea was with Jack and menaced.
Yeah, menaced the Jamaillian warriors with a sword.
Oh, yes, sorry. I was
Yeah.
like not understanding for some reason. She was guarding Jack's back, and Wintrow caught one flash from her dark and angry eyes. He tried not to care. He had to bring Kennit back to his own deck. He wished she could understand that despite what Kennit had done to her, there was still a bond between Kennit and him. He wished he could understand it himself and then cross the deck at a half run. So again, there's a lot at play here. There's a lot of this like struggle going on where he's reading into what Althea's thinking of him because he understands how she's feeling, but you know, he sort of doesn't care because the person he cares about is dying in this moment.
Yeah.
And that's Kennit. And I think this is such an interesting point of view, and what happens to Wintrow in the wake of Kennit is interesting to me because it does sort of feel like another step on the wheel, right? That has been happening for Kennit. Like Kennit was the scared boy, became a pirate, becomes Igorot when he takes over with Wintrow. And now Wintrow's taking the step from the scared boy in the pirate's command to captain.
Mm-hmm.
And it might not be the same path. Obviously, a lot of things changed in the cycle that Kennit created.
And Wintrow's a lot different than...
Yes, and we have
Kennit
talked
was.
about how abuse cycles are not actually a thing. So I won't get into that. I'm just stating the way this is written.
Yeah.
But we do see that sort of change where before Wintrow was a lot more caring and kind. And here in this moment, there's some of that casual cruelty of Kennit that has clearly rubbed off on him. Obviously it feels justified in this moment, but then sometimes it did for Kennit too, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the point, that Wintrow wouldn't have acted like this a year ago when he first stepped on Vivacia's deck. This is not the Wintrow that we started with, but now he has grown into this man who has been altered for good and for bad by Kennit, right? Like he killed that man who attacked Kennit. No remorse, didn't even think twice. The satrap is scared and he thinks, what a nuisance. He says it out loud. What a nuisance. and then kind of doesn't care that he did, and then just commands somebody to take care of it. And I think that like echoing of Kennit's footsteps, following in Kennit's footsteps, is such an interesting character thing. I don't know. I think all of this is so good. This chapter is such an interesting look into all the choices and everything that has led up to this moment and how that affects our characters going forward.
Vivacia, once they're on deck, Vivacia screams out like, "Bring me Kennit. Paragon, Paragon, we have him. Kennit is here." Wintrow exchanged a glance with Etta. The pirate hung silently between them. Etta's eyes were wide and dark. "To the foredeck," Wintrow said quietly. Then he shouted to the crew, "Get us clear of the ship. It's sinking. Get us on our way before the other fleets can close in." Jack announces cheerily, "We're a bit late for that." And she dumps the satrap on Vivacia's deck.
I should mention, that when Jack talks, there is a switch in point of view. We go from Wintrow's point of view to Althea's with that Jack exclamation. Even though there's not a separation in my book.
There is not in mine either.
Yeah, but I made note of reading, because this happened in one other chapter, that technically from Jack's exclamation on, we are now in Althea's point of view.
Yeah.
But it is not super clear unless you're paying attention while you're reading.
Jack is then trying to help the satrap stop the bleeding in his stab wound, rips off some of his shirt and puts it on there. Like, "Hey, keep pressure on this. It didn't really hit anything important. You're not going to die. Kennit took your death for you. Best get below and lie down until someone has time to see to you." And the satrap obviously doesn't really know what to do. He's never really been in a battle before. He drops the rag nervously and sways on his feet. Althea kept a firm grip on him as Jack took his other arm with a shake of her head. She rolled her eyes at Althea.
To be fair, Jack doesn't really seem like the kind, compassionate sort.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, she's definitely kind in her own way and goofy, but I don't think she's really the
she's not
nurturing
no
type. But she is going to take care of the satrap, and she will make sure that he's okay, which I think is good.
So now we get Althea's point of view of her staring at Wintrow, because she looks at Wintrow again, carrying Kennit along. That man had raped her, and Wintrow had still risked his own life for him. She's clenching her jaws. And then all of a sudden, Satrap wails, "Malta!" as if you would call for Mama. "I'm bleeding. I'm dying. Where are you?" And Althea thinks, well, that's a great question, actually. Where did my niece go?
Yeah, wait. Where'd Malta go?
And then she sees them and then sees Malta and Reyn and halts in amazement. They're working together, and Reyn is going unveiled and Malta's head was uncovered, and she sees them working together quite well.
She also notes that in the sunlight, Malta's scar is tinted red.
Yeah.
Glinting red, sorry.
Reyn put his arm around the man they were helping and took him below while Malta hastened over to the satrap. But she addressed her first words to Althea. "Reyn thinks I'm beautiful. Can you believe that? Do you know what he said about my hands? That they will scale heavily as far as my elbows, most likely. He says if I rub off the dead skin, I'll see the scarlet scales working through. He thinks I'm beautiful." Her niece's eyes shone with joy as she rattled words at Althea. And more than joy? Althea leaned forward incredulously. Reyn was right. Malta had a rain-wild gleam to her eyes now. Althea lifted a hand to cover her mouth in shock. And then she doesn't seem to notice the shock and moves over to the satrap. Is like, "Oh, you poor thing," to the satrap.
She goes, "Oh, you are hurt."
Yeah.
I thought you were just, "Well, you poor thing." Which is really funny because clearly she didn't think he was actually dying or hurt at all. So it is a shock to her that that he is hurt. Actually, he did get hurt. So he does actually need her to pay attention. And I think it's funny knowing, I know we're in Althea's point of view, but we do know from Malta that she sort of sees him like a son and or annoying little brother. Like she does see him as somebody that she does have to take care of. And so it's funny in that moment of like, oh, whatever, he's just whining like normal, to be like, oh no, poor baby. You actually, okay, let me just take care of that. Like, I'm so sorry.
And then she shuffles him away and Althea can turn away from that spectacle.
Yes. So I love that. I love that aspect. And I love that we get to see her do that as well.
So she nudges Jack and then says, "Come on." and they hasten up towards the foredeck so we can witness what is happening up there. Following Kennit's blood trail. The beads and puddles of blood looked odd to her. Then it struck her. The wizard wood was refusing it. Kennit's blood remained atop it, as did the other blood shed today. She tried to puzzle out what that might mean. Was Vivacia rejecting the dying pirate? She felt a sudden lift of hope. An instant later, it turned to dismay as an immense splash showered her. "That was close," Jack exclaimed. And the next ballast stone hit Vivacia's hull. So there is a fight from the rest of the fleet starting here. They're launching stones and trying to attack Vivacia.
Right. And obviously in this moment, Vivacia and Paragon are not fleeing or going away, but they will need to soon.
Yeah.
So,
well, Marietta and Motley are also trapped. There is a circle of ships surrounding them all at the
Yes.
moment.
Well, I think if I remember correctly, they
do manage to slip through because of live ships. But right now, Althea is turning wildly, seeking a gap in the circle of ships that surrounded them. I mean, it's not like a tight circle, but there's ships from all sides kind of closing in.
Yeah. So it is not great. It's not looking great. And at the moment, there's a lot happening. And so, like, there's not a lot that can be done because everybody's focusing on Kennit at the moment.
Etta, his panting whisper barely reached her ears. "Yes, dearest, I'm here. Hush, hush. We'll take you to Vivacia. You'll be all right." She wanted to be gentle, but she needed to get him to the foredeck. Vivacia could lend him strength. She knew it, despite the wooden despair on Wintrow's face. Kennit would be all right. He had to be all right. The danger of losing him drove all doubts from her mind and heart. What else could it matter to her what he had done to anyone else? Well, he had loved her as no one else ever had. "I won't be all right, my dear." His head hung forward on his chest. His gleaming black curls curtained his face. He coughed slightly, blood sprayed. She did not know how he had found the strength to speak. "'Cause it's the charm." His gasped whisper was desperate, urgent. "My love, take the wizardwood charm from my wrist. Wear it always until the day you pass it on to our son, to Paragon. You will name him Paragon. You will wear the charm?" Of course, but you aren't going to die. Hush, save your strength." And then she calls out, "Vivacia, Vivacia, he's here." So the charm is making her promise to fulfill Kennit's promise to Paragon.
Yes. This makes me tear up too.
Yeah,
I think
it's very
That's
emotional.
kind of cute that the charm knows that is a promise that Kennit made.
It's bonded to Kennit, yeah.
Yeah, and then is fulfilling that promise. Because if Kennit had survived this, would he have named his son Paragon? Doubtful. I don't think he would have. I don't think he cared. I don't think he cared the promise he made. But he is dying, and
I think he cared and would think about it, but then would immediately be like, "Nope, Paragon was dead, and the memory's dead with him. To name him Paragon would be against his luck."
Right. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be as heartless as I'm making it out to seem, but I don't think it would have happened, and so I think
it's still pretty heartless.
Yeah, but I think it is sweet of the charm to carry on that tradition and do that for Paragon, because I think Paragon is usually the one fixing Kennit's mistakes for everyone else, right? And in this moment, or maybe not fixing his mistakes, but just taking his side no matter what and sort of like seeing the bright side of everything. And I think in this moment, his kin, the dragon in this charm, is looking out for him and his feelings. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that it's really big of him to do that. But also, I don't understand why it matters that to the charm who hates Kennit and like why he needs to save face here.
Yeah.
Maybe he respects Paragon as a dragon and so therefore respects the promise made to a dragon, or as both dragons. But
I'm not sure. It's very vague of why the charm acts the way it acts a lot of the time.
True. But also I found it very interesting that the charm would want Etta to wear him.
Wouldn't want to be dormant.
Yeah, that's fair. and wants to be with Etta until the charm is passed on to their son.
Yeah. Because then, as we learned in the inheritance,
Yes.
if the charm was, dormant for all the time that Etta was not wearing it before the son grew up or anything like that, then they wouldn't know what was going on.
True. And
They
we
wouldn't
also
have any
know,
memories.
we also know from the inheritance that if Etta is going to wear the charm, then she also will somewhat bond with the charm, and he will be able to have her memories and take part of her with him
Yeah.
into the advice that he ends up giving to the son when the son wears it.
Yeah. Again, rest in peace to the son.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really interesting. But I also wonder when Etta ends up taking the charm off of Kennit.
Yeah, maybe right here. I don't know.
Could be. I don't know. Very unclear, but very interesting to me. And we do know that the charm doesn't talk to Etta, at least by the end of this book or
Right.
next time we see them even. I don't know. Maybe it does. We'll never know after this book. But yeah, the charm just chills.
So Etta tears off a cloak and lays it down on the foredeck and says, like, here, lay him here. And Vivacia's like, no, give him to me. And she seeks reassurance from Vivacia, Etta does, saying, you can help him. He won't die. Vivacia doesn't answer, just meets her gaze. The inevitability of the ocean was in her look. Give him to me, she said again quietly. An unuttered scream echoed through Etta's heart. Air would not come into her lungs. Her whole body tingled strangely and then went numb. Give him to her, she conceded. She could not feel her mouth move, but she heard the words. Wintrow and Jola raised Kennit's body, offering him to Vivacia. Etta kept Kennit's hand tightly in hers as the ship took him in her cradling arms. Oh, my love, she mourned as Vivacia received him. Then the figurehead turned away and she had to release his dangling hand. So Vivacia holds him close, having her head bent over him for a bit. Etta's thinking, like, could a live ship weep? And then all of a sudden, a rock strikes Vivacia once again, and then Vivacia screams out aloud, Paragon, hurry, hurry, Kennit is yours, come and take him. And Etta is very confused here. She's like, no, that's his enemy.
Yeah, why would you give him to the enemy?
Yeah. And Vivacia's like, hush, this must be, Paragon is not his enemy. I give him back to his family, Etta. You should go with him. And then Paragon is groping blindly, still with his eyes closed, getting close to Vivacia. Here, I am here, she called, guiding him to her. And Etta's like, this is an insane maneuver because we're getting the ship's bows close together so the figureheads can exchange a body.
Yes, they're touching.
This is absolutely insane.
Very.
So rocks are still coming down. They hit the water close to them, splashing water on both of them at the same time. So they're very close at this point, and they're ignoring that. Paragon's hands suddenly clasped Vivacia and fumbled their way to Kennit in her arms. For a long instant, the two live ships rocked in a strange embrace, the pirate between them. Then, silently, Vivacia placed Kennit's lax body in Paragon's waiting arms. Etta, standing at the railing, watched the change that came over the ship's young face. He caught his lower lip between his teeth, perhaps to keep it from trembling. Then he raised Kennit's body. Paragon's pale blue eyes opened at last. He looked a long time into the pirate's face, gazing with the hunger of years. Then, slowly, he clasped him close. Kennit looked almost doll-like in the figurehead's embrace. His lips moved, but Etta heard nothing. The blood from Kennit's injuries vanished swiftly as it touched Paragon's wood, soaking in immediately and leaving no stain of passage. Then, he bowed over Kennit and kissed the top of his head with an impossible tenderness. At last, Paragon looked up. He gazed at her with Kennit's eyes and smiled, an unbearably sad smile that yet held peace and wholeness. An elderly woman on Paragon's deck strained toward Kennit's body. Tears ran down her face and she cried aloud but wordlessly, a terrible gabbling wail. Behind her, she also sees Brashen, arms crossed and eyes narrowed, but he did not try to interfere with anything, and he even stepped forward and helped support Kennit's body to the deck. Now you, Vivacia said suddenly, and she reached for Etta.
Yeah.
So we see Paragon's eyes open into the pale blue.
Yes. And
now we get Kennit's point of view of this.
Yeah, but I do want to before we get to that, I just want to say I find it endlessly interesting that we have Etta be the person in this moment to watch over the things happening and to give us the perspective. Number one, because she doesn't have any understanding of live ships. And number two, because I think she's the only one who loves Kennit in a way that is guilt-free. Even though she doesn't like what he did to Althea, I don't think she really cares ultimately. Like she feels bad for Althea for sure, but
and knows that Kennit isn't as nice as he presented all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And so some of that was rocked, but she found out at his death that she ultimately still loves him the same.
Right. And I think it goes back to that love that we see between Reyn and Malta, where it's this accepting love.
Right.
That like somebody is seeing you for who you are, not just who you pretend to be, and loves you despite that. And I think, I mean, unfortunately, Etta feels that way towards Kennit. And I don't know that Kennit can love that way and that he necessarily feels like that towards Etta, but he does seem to feel his own version of care towards Etta, as we've discussed throughout these chapters. So I think that it makes sense that we're seeing it from Etta's point of view, because she can give us the story and not have to spend paragraphs talking about the guilt she feels about caring about him anyway, because to her it doesn't matter.
It can let the moment breathe a bit narratively.
And it does allow us to focus on the important topic of the death of Kennit and what's happening there. And because we have other perspectives, we sort of know some of the things that are happening that she doesn't understand. And I think it is also good to get the perspective of someone who doesn't understand, so we can see the little things happening that I think otherwise would have been skipped over because Althea or Brashen or even Wintrow sort of know what's happening, so they wouldn't feel the need to focus on those aspects. And so I think it is good to have that sort of outside perspective, but also a perspective that cares about Kennit and what happens to him in such a way. But yes, we do end with Kennit's perspective and what he feels happening to him.
And he's fading in and out, right? He's fading fast, dying quickly. And he hears, Wintrow mutter sorry as he jostles him. He hears Etta say, hush, save your strength, because the charm was talking to her and she thought it was him. And he's like, I just need to tune all of these people out. I need to ignore them. And if he ignored them, what could he focus on? What was important now?
Before we get into that, I just want to say that this talking that he's hearing between Wintrow and Etta is when they're trying to get him up the stairs to the foredeck. So he is not yet at Etta. We've gone back in time a little bit.
Right.
And I think that's important to notice, because this is when the charm starts talking to Etta. And so this is Hobb letting us know that it is without a doubt not Kennit who has said these things. It is the charm, because in this moment, Kennit is blocking them out and is annoyed by them. He doesn't care what's happening. He's just sort of trying to focus on what's left.
He felt Vivacia take him. Oh yes, this would be best. This would be easiest. He relaxed and tried to let go, feeling his life seeping out of his body, and he hovered, waiting to be gone. But Vivacia holds him together, saying, wait, hold on just for a moment or two. You need to go home, Kennit. You were not mine, you were never mine, and we always knew that. You need to be one once more. Wait, just a bit longer, wait. And then she calls out Paragon. Kennit's here, and he is scared.
Right. Well, before we get to that, this is when she had leaned over his body. So Etta had seen Vivacia lean over his body and hold him close. And she had thought that Vivacia was crying in this moment, or was wondering if Vivacia could cry. And this is the moment that Vivacia is saying,
Hold on a second. Yeah.
Hold on. You're not mine. We both know this. And I find that also interesting because from Althea's point of view earlier, Althea was hopeful that this was Vivacia refusing to accept the bond with Kennit. And from this, it's kind of understood that it's not that. It's not that she wouldn't.
No.
It's that his actual family is there and he's not whole and he deserves to go whole into somebody.
Yeah.
And so she's giving him where he belongs. But Kennit, like you said, is very scared of this and does not love that is what's happening now.
Yeah. Paragon was lost to him, no more than a boyish ghost now. He had killed him. His own ship could never take him back. He could never go home. Paragon would fling him away, would leave him to sink beneath the sea just as he had. He knew the touch of the big hands that accepted him. He would have wept, but there were no tears left. He tried to make his mouth move, to speak aloud how sorry he was. There, there, someone said comfortingly. Paragon? His father? Someone who loved him said, Don't fear. I have you now. I won't let you go. You will not be hurt any more. Then he felt the kiss that absolved him without judgment. Come back to me, he said. Come home. The darkness was no longer black. It grew silvery. And then, as Paragon embraced him and took him home, he faded into white.
So that's...
Oh, it's so sad.
That's very sad. And that is what Etta saw Paragon mouthing, but couldn't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to cry. It's so sad.
Which is an amazing feat that Robin Hobb makes us feel this for Kennit and for Paragon, because it's such a big thing for Paragon too.
Yeah.
Of becoming whole, of accepting somebody who hurts you that bad because you are inextricably linked like that, how
Right.
Kennit and Paragon are.
And once again, we have that theme of being home. That home is a person's love for you, I guess, or love that is accepting, like an accepting love of who you are and not caring. And we have that here at the very end. And yeah, very sad and touching in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad that we're able to feel that. Although still it's hard. It's very bittersweet. It's very hard because he is still a bad person. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a very emotional chapter. It's a great chapter. Actually, I really like this one. But we end it there. And yeah.
I do want to bring up, sort of point out a little detail here, because I don't think we'll ever get a similar point of view, but this is the only point of view of knowing what happens when you die on your live ship's deck.
Yeah.
So I found it very interesting that we have Kennit noting that death isn't dark anymore. It's going to silver and then to white. And I find that interesting because obviously we know the skill is silver, but also the silver of the wood and all of that. I think it makes me think of so many questions like, well, first of all, we know you are aware of going into the ship, right? So Althea's dad would have had a similar sort of sensation, I'm sure.
Right.
But also, I thought it was interesting because it made me think about when Althea is with Vivacia whenever Bolt was still in full control.
Mm-hmm.
Althea is in the ship in this dark space, and the ship made a comment of, if you let go, this is where you'll be.
Yeah.
Like this deep, dark space, you'll never see sunlight again. This is where you will stay. I thought was a really interesting look at where you go, where your soul goes, I guess, when you're captured here. But with Althea, that seems so trapped and dark and scary. And
Yeah.
then here with Kennit, it's so freeing.
There's a difference, though, right? Because that was when Vivacia was split. She was no longer whole. And I think live ships, as they are right now, are whole because the dragon part of them is not aware.
It's dormant, yeah.
Yeah. And yes, you can kind of think of the dragon part as trapped in some of them because it's, buried upon layers and layers of human memories.
Right.
But for the most part, they're dormant. Vivacia's was awoken and they kind of had split up because Vivacia's personality was being held down with Bolt in control. And Paragon had made that deal with the two dragons and him to be one entity now.
Yes.
So I think it's something to do with like that acceptance of being whole and that act of forcibly keeping your parts of yourself separate allows you to submerge other parts of yourself.
Yeah, that's fair.
So again, kind of like that acceptance that you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. But yeah, so I guess that was something that came up to my thought of
their different descriptions. Yeah,
like how different it was and how it felt like it would be such a bad experience to go in, and then we have the point of view of somebody actually doing it.
Different emotions too.
Also that, yeah.
Surrounding it,
Yeah. Kennit doesn't super have a choice.
Well, no, he doesn't, but he's also absolved of his crimes,
That's
right?
True, yeah.
He is welcomed home with unconditional love, and that is not the feeling that Althea had when she was sinking down and met Vivacia.
True. It was more of an escape and more of running. So I don't know. I thought that was just a cool little detail that we get. It does answer some questions in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if you have any thoughts on this chapter, please let us know. It's a very intense one.
Yeah, lots of emotion.
Yeah, you can find us at isfitshappy@gmail.com, or you can message us or comment on any of our posts on our social medias. We're at Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Blue Sky, and Reddit. isfitshappy on all of those is our username or our page name. So find us, let us know what you got going on, what you're thinking about this chapter and about the books.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, now we have some questions, only one of which is going to be sort of about a recent chapter. And then we're going to do a little bit of leftover questions from the 5-year, just because our special 5-year episode was really long and people added some questions after we had recorded, and we just figured it'd be better to answer them now. So
exactly.
So if you don't want to hear general questions after the first question, totally fine. We'll see you next week. Maybe you don't even listen to the questions anyway, in which case, totally fine. See you next week. But for now, we're going to start with an email that we got from a listener named Simon. And he sent in a little bit of a thought on the difference between how Kennit and Wintrow interact with and view the serpents.
Yeah, or the world around them in general.
Yeah, and the world around them. Yeah, you're right. And it all is based on Bill Brown's thing theory. And so I'm going to do my best to simplify. I'm really sorry, Simon, if I do a poor job, but essentially Bill Brown's thing theory is that, as Simon says, we usually see stuff other than ourselves as instruments or tools that we can use to do things. But if we're able to step outside of ourselves, we'd be able to recognize that they have just as much selfhood as we do. So thing doesn't mean that it is a tool necessarily. Like thing in this theory means that it has its own personhood. It's just like whenever you realize occasionally, or maybe not everybody does this, but occasionally you can realize that when you're walking down the street, all the people that you're walking around also have inner lives that are just as complicated as your own, even though you don't know that stranger, you don't know anything about them or their life. And your friends and family even, sometimes that's easier to remember that occasionally they're not just people in your story, you're a person in theirs. And so,
Yeah. Simon says that the example that he gives in the email where it kind of gets a little wacky is that Bill Brown's thing theory applies to everything. So he says if you're looking through a window and suddenly realize that the window is dirty, that's when you realize that the window is a thing.
right.
But the thing theory states that everything is its own personal thing with its own agency, even the window, even the table that you're sitting next to.
Yes.
So that's where it gets a little wacky, but like that's where the theory comes in, you know, that everything has its own agencies. They all have their hopes and dreams and things that they want to do in their lives.
Yes. And so what an interesting theory. Love it so much. I'm definitely going to be digging into that a little bit more. But that knowledge is important to look at how Simon views the difference between Wintrow and Kennit.
Yes.
And this is that Wintrow is really good at the thing theory. Wintrow is really good at seeing things as things, whereas Kennit is most likely due to the things that have happened to him in his past, more locked on his inner self bubble. And so Kennit has a harder time viewing even people as things because he just sees them as tools for him to use. They're not things, they are tools.
Simon says that Kennit is trapped in his own position and instrumentalizes everyone and everything, becoming exasperated at other things and people and noticing pretty much only when they go against his plans.
Yes.
When they throw a wrench in his own desires, it's like, oh, well, they purposely did this or did something else because, you know, some reason.
But yeah, Wintrow's better at that. Also, probably from his background because he was trained as a monk and trained to sort of think more outside of the box. But Wintrow is better at seeing things for the role that they play in their own lives and their own agency that they have. And so whenever we see Wintrow, for example, save She Who Remembers, Simon believes that Wintrow would have done that regardless, doesn't believe that Wintrow has been sort of skilled into helping She Who Remembers, that more so that's just Wintrow inherently sees She Who Remembers as a thing that has agency and has a place in the world and would want to help anyway. Yeah, it's no difference than the slaves.
You would regard the suffering of her the same as the suffering of a human in the same position. And kind of relates Beloved in that same way, that since they have such an absolute value and equate everything to the same value, that it makes them hard to relate to other people sometimes. So they might be too good at doing this to relate as easily to other human beings.
Right.
Which is also interesting.
Yeah. And I actually really love that. I love how that fits in to this narrative and sort of explains Wintrow's struggle, I think, in a better way.
And Simon says here to explain his emotions sometimes, you know?
Yes, yeah. And it does sort of make sense, right? Because obviously Kennit believing that is in like a very negative version. They're like two opposite ends of the spectrum of how they interact with the world. So it is really interesting though to think about Wintrow and the way he interacts with the world and the struggles that he has with other people is coming from this place that he absolutely, above all things, everything is a thing that has their own agency and needs. And most people don't really think that broadly. And obviously there's people in between Kennit and Wintrow where mostly people know that at least other human beings are important and have, you know, autonomy and stuff, but sometimes that stops at slavery or at somebody being in a different class or a different race. And so it's really interesting to see how Wintrow navigates that. And then to turn that towards the serpents, it makes sense that then Wintrow would be viewing them as creatures that have needs and wants, whereas Kennit
use them as a tool.
Can use them as a tool because that's all they are to him. They are just tools to be used, and that's why he probably doesn't even think about it up until Vivacia says they might turn on us next.
Right.
That, oh yeah, the serpents actually
can be independent.
can be independent and don't have to just do whatever I tell them to do.
Exactly.
So I think that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a great way to put into words kind of the feelings that Robin Hobb puts across the page. So
Yeah.
I do think that fits quite well.
Yeah. So thank you for introducing us to the theory,
Yes.
Bill Brown's thing theory.
And we're going to continue on with Simon's email here, but he does transition into the 5-year anniversary question, more of like a general thing for us. So we're going to transition to all of the rest of the questions that we had.
Yes.
So the rest of Simon's email here is kind of asking us about how Hobb sees family and our thoughts on it, because there's a couple different ways to look at it. One, that, family and descent from the same family matter because that's who they are. Like, we're centering this story around this family because they're important.
Mhm.
Or does Hobb see family in that, out of the Vestrits, the Farseers, the Cooperses, whatever story you're looking at, are they important because of the experiences and the events surrounding them and, how they react in those things? So that's kind of like the two different dichotomies he's asking us about.
Yeah. And what we think,
Mm-hmm.
Hobb is meaning to do.
Because Simon says that he's leaning towards that second one, that Hobb does like the experiences, right? It's not necessarily the descent from a family that makes you important. It's
Right.
like what happens around you, your choices, that sort of thing. But he also mentions that he's not certain, especially in the Reyn Wilds books. And I was kind of leaning towards his answer as well. However, that kind of threw me because I haven't read the Reyn Wilds in a while, and you've read them more recently. So I was wondering if you thought that was different in those books, or she handled family different in those books.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding what Simon is writing in that, but to me, it felt more like the family, like the role of family and who the people are in the Reyn Wilds directly dictates what happens to them. And so that's more,
Yeah.
it's more about who they are than
Yeah.
what they are, I guess. I don't know. But I don't know. I guess to me, these books, I feel like all of the important things do happen to families that have a history of being a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the familial trope of like, you know, they were from this great family, so they are going to do something great kind of fits. I mean,
Right. I know you're looking at a fantasy story, right? And it's the bastard of the king.
yes.
And it's all about the royal family, and all of this stuff happens because he's in a position of royalty or next to it.
Right.
And he's embroiled in all of this politics because he's in the court.
Yes. And like he wouldn't be able to be in that position without being the family that he's part of.
Right.
Like his lineage directly affects his story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of true for everyone, right? Like the Vestrits, even if they weren't
Vivacia.
Vestrits, this problem wouldn't be happening to them. If Brashen, although I guess Brashen's a good example against it because he's disowned and his like part in the story isn't anything to do with who he was.
Yeah, there's going to be a mixture of both in the plot, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do feel like it's sort of, while I feel like there is that thread of your history matters, like what has happened before you has brought you to this point, I also think that it is like, it's like kind of a mix of the two because there is that sort of melding of it is purely decision based. Like Fitz himself makes decisions that nobody else could make because of
but he's also in that position because of his actual DNA of having both the wit and the skill and being of the royal family.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic because there does seem to be kind of a, like Simon lays out, a couple choices, but the way Robin Hobb writes is that the answer is both, as kind of annoying as that is.
Yeah.
Because both things are very important in the identity of a family, and the way that she writes focuses on the experiences and the events surrounding those individuals and building off of their responses to those experiences and the traumas that they endure and how that informs their future decision making. So it's not necessarily that their DNA or their specific family has them succeed or is important to the plot besides the setup, in my opinion. But she does write about important families that are in certain situations, in unique situations that they might not have gotten into besides by the benefit of who they were.
Yeah.
But it's the individuals and the events surrounding them that proceed through the rest of the story.
Yeah. And I guess if we're looking at the Reyn Wilds, you could think of Tymara, because Tymara isn't necessarily from a big, well-named family, but is a very central character. However, her family is still Reyn Wild. And they are, like, her being so changed is evident of her DNA and of where her family comes from, and puts her in the position to be a special caretaker, to get wings later, to do all these things. But it kind of is because of her DNA that this is even able to happen. And so I would argue, even when we're following people who aren't necessarily Farseer level or even Beloved doesn't come from a well-off family that helped them get their start. It's still that upbringing that has shaped who they are and shaped their story and how they got to where they are and how they act. And so I guess to me the DNA is sort of an important aspect, because I think that really does shape things. But I don't think it necessarily has to be the DNA of a special person for Hobb to consider their story to be worth telling.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering the question correctly, but that's how I feel. And that's what I read out of what you're asking. So hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Simon. Thanks for emailing in for the first time. We hope to hear more from you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Simon.
So I'll take over kind of the prompting the questions for this 5-year here. So thank you all once again for all of your emails, your messages, the kind words that you sent in, the questions that you've sent in. I do want to kind of quick shout out Angelique. She sent in a picture of her cat and a tattoo of Fitz's charging buck sigil. So very cool.
Yes.
Thanks for joining in and messaging us. But we have a message and an email from Ellen, who has a couple questions for us. One is, do you have pets? If not, why not?
Yeah, what a great question, Ellen. Luke, do you want to take this?
We both want dogs.
Yes.
However, we have, and this ties into Ellen's second question, we have been moving around a bit, and we're at a few places where we were settled in one place, but we decided not to get them because of finances and things like that. And it's a good thing because then we ended up moving. But every single time that we have a goal, something happens where it's a good thing that we didn't end up getting a pet, but we do want them. And Emma blames it on me because I'm usually the one to say, not right now.
Yeah, no. Luke is the voice of reason. Surprisingly, the voice of reason in our relationship. Just joking. It should not be that big of a surprise. But no, we do want pets. We will eventually get them.
Yes,
but yeah, I think right now we just we don't know where we want to be in the future. We're I don't want to say unsettled, but in a way unsettled because we don't have a definite home base yet that we're like, this is it, this is the place. So there hasn't been
taking life as it comes.
Yeah, there's kind of a good reason to wait until we have a more stable home for a pet.
And I'm a dog person, so I want dogs, and I'm allergic to cats. And Emma's kind of allergic to cats.
To animals, period.
Oh.
I just don't care. I will deal with it. So.
I'm very allergic to cats, so
yeah.
I think
I'm mildly allergic to anything with fur.
Well, dogs it is.
Yep.
Eventually.
I had lots of pets growing up though, so I am chill with basically any pet.
And then Ellen also asks, why did you move around the world? It's such a big thing because they're moving next door and it's still stressful. So, surprise, we moved around the world again.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, back from America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had friends. My best friend moved to Australia a few years ago for work, and we wanted to visit him and his partner, his wife. And they said, yeah, come visit. But also, ha ha ha, joking, there's this visa that some of our friends use that you could stay there for a year. So we applied for the visa and then messaged them and said, hey, we're coming for a year. And they're like, no, you're not. You're joking. And then we stayed for a year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the working holiday visa. So
Yeah.
I feel like probably anybody not American has heard of a working holiday visa. They're not really talked about as much in America.
Yeah.
So we had never heard of it. And I don't know, maybe that's just our own upbringings. I don't know. But we had never heard of them before. But we decided we'd do it quick before Luke turned 30 because you have to be under 30.
Yep.
And Luke only had one more year of not being 30 at the time. So
We stayed the year, and you had been looking at grad schools.
yeah, I had been looking at grad schools through pandemic. And obviously with a pandemic going on, I did not want to go back to school. And then we had stayed in Australia for a year, and we kind of were at an impasse where we didn't really want to leave Australia, but we also were fine going home. And I decided to apply to the University of Sydney, thinking I would not get in, so it wouldn't matter. And then I got in to get my master's degree, which I had been thinking about anyway. And so it just felt like a good time. And we were already there. So we just stayed for another year and a half. And yeah, now our visa's up. And so we had to come back home.
Yeah. And this time we really wanted to stay.
Yeah, this time, yeah, we got really attached to Australia.
More time to sink in and live there, but we're back in the States here. So
yeah, so
moving across the world for the first time was just kind of a fun little 1 year lark. And then we're like, well, might as well try to stay. Stayed, and now we have to move back around the world.
Yes.
So I agree, it is stressful, Ellen.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, it's fun to do new things. And I guess I grew up moving all of the time. So to me, moving isn't that big of a deal. It's annoying. I think moving is always annoying. You always realize how much stuff you have whenever you move. And
Emma's definitely one to accumulate stuff.
I'm like a little hoarder of knickknacks. So one thing about me is I'm going to get a knickknack.
Patience's apartment here.
Yes, literally. Luke, not so much. He could live without all the extra frills. But yeah, so moving is big, but I don't know. We like it enough to do it.
Thank you for that. Then we have a message from Peculiar Ponies. And they're asking about if there was a prequel book about Realm of the Elderlings, whose story would you like to see more of? Anybody's, but a prequel book. So before.
Beloved.
Okay.
Because I'm so curious about the Whites and Beloved's story. But I think if we're talking, it has to be somebody from Buckkeep, then
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be.
That's fair. But if it had to be, like if I had to narrow down, not do Beloved, I would also really love to see the boys, the Verity
and Chivalry growing up.
And even Regal. I think their childhood would be a really interesting story.
Yeah, I would be definitely interested in them. My first thought when I saw this message was King Bounty and Shrewd as a kid. Kind of the war to conquer and join all of the 6 duchies together under one kingdom.
Fair.
And then the conception and growing up of Chade with Shrewd there in court. And then finally kind of his exile and then return with King Shrewd kind of centered in that story. I think that would be really interesting.
That would be interesting.
And of course, besides like, you know, the standard Patience and Lacey prequel that was kind of hinted at by Robin Hobb at one point. I don't know if it's still on the table or a manuscript that she has, or, you know, anything with the Out Islanders, like King Wisdom would be really fun to see like his journey up to find the Elderlings and carve his dragon.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting to me, because then it would be kind of that intersection of the cataclysm happened. How much of the Elderlings are left?
Yeah.
You know?
I would love to see the cataclysms.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, I also would love to see like how that happened, what happened, and how people were reacting to it. Did they know that they were being plotted against?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Did anybody know? I don't know. So,
And then if you would live in the world, in the realm of the Elderlings, where would you live and what would be your trade?
probably Chelsea. Just kidding. I would probably be a traveling minstrel, just because I like music and I play an instrument, and I play multiple instruments. Not to brag, but I think that'd probably be what I ended up doing.
Yeah. I think I would just be like a hunter or a fisherman or something somewhere.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just on like a small town, kind of close to a big town, like a half-day walk to a big town or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know exactly where. Maybe in like it'd be cool to be in the Old Blood community.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're just wishful thinking, like, oh, if I had the wit, that'd be cool. But
although,
a small community like that would be kind of cool and kind of closer to a big town like Black Rolf lives.
Yeah, no, I think I'd probably try to be a wandering. I mean, realistically, I probably would be like, I think it'd be cool to be a lady in waiting. Because, like,
yeah.
Do I have the talent to be a traveling minstrel? Probably not.
If you trained.
True. Oh, you know what? I'd love to be the guy who writes everything down.
Fedrin?
Yeah.
The scribe? The traveling
I'd love to be
scribe.
a scribe.
Yeah.
I want to be a traveling thing.
Yeah, you just want to travel.
I think, yeah, that's just who I am. I like travel, so I wouldn't want to have to be stuck in one place, but I don't know. But I definitely want to live in Buckkeep over the other places, I think, because...
Or in the Six Duchies, or just in
Well, I guess,
Duchy?
Six Duchies, okay. Yeah, anywhere in the Six Duchies.
I think living in Jamaillian would be kind of cool, because it's supposed to be like a super nice city, although it's kind of falling into disrepair under Cosgo.
I don't really want to live somewhere where slavery is a possibility.
Or living where Beloved grew up. That sounds bright and sunny and sunshine and flowers. And
yeah, I guess
real nice.
Northerner is just in how I was raised. I need the snow.
Yeah. Well, right off the bat, I'm going to apologize to Phil, because his question is, what did you think of the Soldier Son trilogy and some of the strongest world building that they think is in those books, but it's spoiled by a protagonist who is so whiny makes Fitz look normal? I apologize to you, because neither of us have read it, actually.
No, you have not.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of mixed things about it. I've heard it's even more divisive than Realm of the Elderlings, because some people truly hate reading about Fitz, and I've heard the same thing that you're saying right now, that the main character is very, very whiny and makes somehow even stupider decisions, and it's more full of trauma somehow and triggering things. So yeah, eventually I'll get around to it. It's just not on my radar at the moment.
Yeah, that's
I don't know.
Obviously I haven't read it either, but I don't know. That review, honestly, is the most compelling review to read it to me. So
more world building, so maybe more answers. And then I mean, it is a different world than Realm of the Elderlings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also more annoying than Fitz? Yes.
Sign me up.
Can't wait. I cannot wait to see somebody try it. That sounds interesting.
And then Christian asks, what gear do you use to record and edit? Because he really likes the sound quality. And then some more kind of questions about editing and things like that. I will take that one, because I am the
editor.
Yes, the editor and the caretaker of all of our equipment.
Yes.
I use Ableton to record and edit. Ableton Live. I have used it for a long time, because when I was a kid, I played around with doing mashups and things like that for fun. And I was just used to the controls, so I use it to record as well. It's very robust. It's not needed for podcast. It's much more of a music production program. I was just used to it, so I use it for this. And then I also use Audacity to help with some other things too, and conversions of files and things like that. As for equipment, we do not have great equipment. It works, and that's all that matters. We don't have very expensive mics or anything like that. I use a Behringer. I don't know the exact model, but a Behringer audio interface to plug the mics into, because we use XLR mics. We don't have USB mics. And we have two dynamic mics. They're ISK brand, ICDM. So I think this brand is kind of like a manufacturer that makes other things, or is either that and like brands them differently, or is kind of like a knockoff kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have not heard of anybody else having these kinds. And you can find like a pack of 3 for like $80 online or something like that, which is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
And I think our cables are just like Amazon basics or something like that, which I need to replace pretty soon.
We also have a pop screen, which is
pop filter on the
helps
mics.
catch your spit or whatever is how Luke
it prevents the P's and B's from being deafening in your ear.
Yeah. So the microphones definitely look like karaoke microphones for any of you listening and didn't understand what Luke said.
Yeah. Like if you go to a concert, they're just like the silver tops, black handle, singing into it.
Yep.
What you would imagine.
Whenever they're not plugged in, I do enjoy holding them occasionally and pretending like I'm, singing to a crowd. But
yeah. Our setup it kind of varies depending on where we are. I mean, what recording studio we're in is basically what apartment we're living in at the time.
True.
We have movable mic arms that I desperately need to replace. Everything is breaking on them, but they were hand-me-downs from a friend, so I really appreciate that. But eventually we'll need to upgrade.
Yes.
I appreciate that you like the sound, that we have a good quality. I've tried to keep it consistent across, but slightly improving, but consistent across the years. And then Christian also asks, how much time do you spend on editing, and have you become more efficient? Yes, I have become more efficient. I think I mentioned this a few episodes ago, but I used to spend a lot of time trying to edit out everything. I used to try to fade in and out of abrupt things, but I have become a lot more efficient because I've gotten used to shortcuts. I have gotten used to what I have to do for each of our voices. So I have like presets for the balance and the EQ and things like that. Settings that I've over 5 years have become used to seeing and know what to set them at for different plugins. And we've gotten better at talking into the mics.
Yeah.
So it kind of reduces some things. We don't say as much anymore.
Also,
I think we do have some filler words that we still use, but is most noticeable, I believe. So
also I started talking louder, which helps with recording purposes. Although sometimes I talk too loud because as I get heated, I speak up because I spent a formative amount of time in Chicago as a child. And so I have the loud Chicago talk when I get excited. So
stereotype, but also true.
Also, yes. I can say that I'm from there. But I definitely, no, I know that Luke will sometimes get mad at me because I do change my volume a lot as we go. And especially on chapters where I'm really heated, I talk very loudly and he gets annoyed. So I'm sure that has been a fun little challenge for him.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on audio stuff, but that's all right. We're supposed to get emotional and heated and sad at all these books. So
it's true.
It's a good thing. Christian also has a couple more questions. Well, one specific question with sub-questions to that is, do you listen to any music while reading? And what specific kind of music do you think fits the realm of the Elderlings best?
First, I will say I cannot listen to music with lyrics if I'm going to read. Because for some reason, the way my brain works, if there are lyrics, I am focusing on the lyrics of the song, not what I'm reading. Even if I know the lyrics of the song, especially if I know the lyrics, then I love them and I'm thinking about the lyrics and the timing. So I have to listen to classical music or like video game soundtracks if I'm going to listen to something while I read. But I also kind of just like ambient noise anyway. So I typically like not listening or like not having headphones in when I'm reading because I like the noise of life around me.
Yeah. I usually don't listen to music while I read. However, I can. I'm pretty good at tuning stuff out. Sometimes I need to turn down the music compared to, I don't know, it like takes up volume in my head to read, and I can't have the music too loud and competing with that. I don't know how to best explain it. But I think I agree with you. The best music that would suit Realm of the Elderlings would be, that kind of video game or ambient or background or atmospheric kind of music. Christian,
Specifically, oh, sorry. I was
go
going to
for
say,
it.
specifically, I think if I was to pick a soundtrack, probably like Zelda soundtrack for Realm of the
Oh,
Elderlings. I feel
okay.
like that fits really well with the vibe.
Nice.
That or maybe, this is kind of a crazy take, but maybe like Elden Ring. The
Wow.
soundtrack track. I
Elden Ring
don't know.
can get very intense.
Yeah, but I feel like so can the books.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I don't know. Anyway.
Christian says that they particularly like listening to Lisa Gerrard a lot. And she is an Australian singer and composer. I have not listened to any of her specific music. However, I'm looking up her the songs that she's popular for, and she has a lot of songs that were on in the movie Gladiator. I think she's the singer across some of those. So like a lot of music, movie music that she's contributed to, kind of that high pitched atmospheric kind of thing. Again, I have not listened to her, but I will say in my mind, the equivalent popping up would be like Enya for Lord of the Rings right now. Just kind of that like. That's what I'm guessing, and I think I could read to that.
Yeah,
I think that would work for me. And before I get into the last question here of our 5-year leftover questions, what about you guys? Please send us in what music you guys listen to. Let us know. I don't know. What's your favorite soundtrack? What's your favorite?
what fits the vibe?
Yeah, I guess. What fits? And what do you guys think of when you read Realm of the Elderlings? But as I mentioned, last but not least, we have a question from Irene. And once again, I'm sorry, Emma, for taking this question because I feel like I'm going to be contributing mostly to it. Irene is looking for some good science fiction recommendations because that's one of their favorite genres. They read a lot of science fiction, have read a lot of the classics, and really like Philip K. Dick as their favorite author, but is looking for something more recent. And I feel like I've had more experience reading science fiction.
Yeah, it depends on what you count as science fiction, but sure.
Science fiction and fantasy, speculative fiction, it kind of all blends together.
Yeah, because it depends. Like, do you count like the Pretties series as science fiction?
It can be, yeah.
I feel like it is, but that doesn't like not everybody would agree, which I don't know.
I mean, there's different layers to it, right?
Yeah.
There's like hard science fiction that's straight up like it has to be kind of like science, hard on the science part of it.
But that is definitely more Luke's genre.
Would you recommend The Pretties?
I think it's an interesting concept, but I don't know. I mean, I read that when I was 15, so when I read it at 15, it felt groundbreaking. I don't know that at 28 I would I'd be like, yeah, this is groundbreaking, but it's fun. It's a fun little light read. Well, I don't know that light is the correct word, but it's a good read.
Yeah. There are some, so I'll recommend some stuff, but I'm going to use this kind of as a jumping off point for recommendations in general for science fiction, because not everybody has dipped their toes into it. And so it's not just going to be newer books. And I will, preface this with, I'm kind of with you, Irene. I've read more of the classics than newer science fiction. So somebody who is well-versed in science fiction can probably comment a few more newer recommendations that are better. But I'll list some books that I have read that I recommend, and then also some series that I've heard about that are very good. So personally, I have read like the classics, Dune, Ender's Game, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Foundation by Isaac Asimov, and as same with you, Irene, Philip K. Dick, like Ubik, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Scanner Darkly, Valis, some of his stuff. All of that is excellent. So if you're looking for some classic science fiction, dip your toes into that. Dune is going to be more like a science fantasy kind of thing. Kind of leans on that. It's a great time to start reading it with the fantastic adaptions that are coming out, the movies. But I've also read Culture Series, which is another kind of classic by Ian Banks. I've only read one book of it, but it was really, really good, and it does come highly recommended. I think it started in early 80s, and I think he finished it in 2012 or something. So the last book might count for recent.
Yeah.
And then some newer ones that I've read that I recommend is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. That is a trilogy. That's also kind of fantasy related. And all of these kind of blur the lines, but I really do recommend that, especially if you like Hobb's writing about and are okay with Hobb's writing about, generational trauma and things going badly. Very well done characters. I really do like all three of those books. She's a great writer. And then I've read book 1 of the Sun Eater trilogy, or not trilogy, Sun Eater series. There's like going to be 10 books or something by Christopher Ruocchio. Not sure his name. The first book is filled with tropes and homages to other science fiction books, but it is very entertaining to read, and I've heard it grows much bigger and better as it goes on, and he grows as a writer. So if you're looking for a big epic, that one's very good. Anything pop into your head before I continue on? I don't want to spit off a bunch of recommendations of book titles and
Yeah. No, that's okay. I was just gonna correct myself. So I said Pretties earlier. It's technically the Uglies series, and that's by Scott Westerfield, and it is technically classified as a dystopian.
Yeah.
Which to me, I feel like dystopia where it's focused on like a sciencey sort of problem feels
science fiction,
Yeah, it feels science fiction to me, but I would
1984, I would say it would be science fiction. That's dystopian.
Yeah. So I'm more of a dystopian sort of like series reader.
Brave New World is a utopian science fiction kind of thing.
But yeah, so The Uglies, Scott Westerfield was the one I was talking about before, but there is another series. It's the Matched series by Ali Condi. I hope that's correct. But I guess it's another like young adult dystopian more so. But that one's kind of interesting because it's a lot heavier on the romance aspects, I will say. But it is really interesting thinking about like control in the government and like how that affects the population and stuff. So that was a really good series that I liked a lot.
Nice. There's a couple other ones that are more recent too. Andy Weir's books, Project Hail Mary and The Martian in particular. I've read both of those. They are good. You have to like the snarky kind of narration that he does because that's kind of all of his characters. But the newest one was Project Hail Mary. That's very good. The Martian obviously had the movie adaptation with Matt Damon. That kind of vibe, if you liked that, you would probably like Project Hail Mary. I think that one's getting an adaptation as well, Project Hail Mary. And then Gideon the Ninth and that whole series there by Tasman Muir is also very, very, very good. I've loved all the books that have come out. Gideon the Ninth, Harrow the Ninth, and then I think Nina the Ninth. And then the last one hopefully comes out soon, I think is Electo. Looking forward to that. Those are very good. And then, of course, the ones that I have not read but I've heard are good. So before I get into those, anything else?
I was just gonna say that I guess I don't know for sure if this counts as dystopian because I have not read the book, but there is an author, S.K. Putt, and they just released a new book. Normally they do like sort of more Nordic. They're working on like a Nordic fantasy that's called Kinslayer series, which is a great read, but not what you're asking about. But they have a new book that they just released. It's called Paralyze. It's kind of spelled funny, but it's like a futuristic book. I know that sci-fi is not all futuristic, but this feels like it potentially could fit in that. And I feel like SK Put is a pretty good author and also a follower. So shout out to you. So thanks for listening. But yeah, that might be something cool. They just released that recently. So
nice.
Thought it worth mentioning.
Good shout out. So some of the other books that I have not read, I've heard are good, are obviously the classics. If you're going to read sci-fi, you have to read Ursula Le Guin. She does obviously Earthsea as well. It's fantasy. It's excellent series. But Ursula Le Guin is also very big in sci-fi, Left Hand of Darkness and The Dispossessed. I've heard those are both excellent. I've only read Earthsea by her, and her other books are on my to-read list as must-reads. Also, Hyperion, I've heard, is excellent. It's a big series by Dan Simmons, The Hyperion Canticle, but the first book I've heard is also kind of like a sci-fantasy kind of thing. Then other books that are more recent, obviously, The Expanse has been really big recently with a TV show adaptation. Heard the books from a friend are really good. Murderbot by Martha Wells is a series that I've heard is really good. And I think that's also getting an adaptation. And then Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin. I don't know if I've said that last name correctly or the name correctly, but that is also a very highly acclaimed sci-fi book recently. And then the last author I'll mention is Adrian Tchaikovsky. He is a very prolific author. I have read one of his fantasy books, but one of his biggest series, Children of Time, I think leans more towards sci-fi. So you might want to check that out as well. So it listed off a lot of books and authors. Don't blame me if you don't like them. I'm just a voice in the void. Those are some books that I've heard are really good from sources I trust, and also books that I've read that I really like, or at least books in a series that I've liked.
I think it's so fun to do book recommendations, if only because I think there's no guarantee, right?
Right,
that, like,
I know.
We all like, obviously, if you're listening to this, you like Realm of the Elderlings. We like Realm of the Elderlings. Yeah, and I think it's so interesting how, like, the differences in what we enjoy in each book really informs what we read and how we pick books. I mean, obviously, like, Realm of the Elderlings is not my typical read. There's nothing wrong with it. I like fantasy, but it was not something I would have picked up. And it's because Luke recommended it to me that I even read it. And it did open the door to trying more books like this that I wouldn't have read otherwise. And so I think it's fun when you get recommendations that might not necessarily be up your alley, and then it ends up opening the door to a whole new fandom.
And of course, it is daunting if that recommendation is 16 books.
Yes.
But yeah.
But you know what? Obviously, people here are willing to do the work and reading that much. So.
It's very hard to think of books when people say, hey, recommend me something that's similar to Robin Hobb, right? Because we don't know why you like Robin Hobb. Because it could be for the magic systems. Yeah. You like the cost of the magic. You like the addictive nature of it. It could be because you like the way she builds her characters.
Yeah.
It could be because of this one specific character.
It could be
like the fool.
Politics.
It could be the politics.
Yeah.
So if you recommend a book for one of those things that, like, oh, I really liked Robin Hobb, I really like this one, you might hate it.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know what? And Luke and I actually just had a conversation about this not that long ago, because I was talking to somebody at work about Robin Hobb, and I said, if you like Wheel of Time, you'll probably like Robin Hobb. And I had told Luke that I said that, and he was so aghast that I would equate the two, because to him, they're so different.
They're different, but they're my top two favorite series.
Yes, but also he was just like, you should not tell somebody if they like Wheel of Time, they're definitely going to like Robin Hobb. Like, they're so different, so whatever. But in my mind, they're very similar. I mean, they definitely do things differently, but the things that I like about them are so similar that to me, it feels like those are equal. They are the same thing. You would if you like one, you'll like the other because of the reasons that I like each story. And so
granted, you haven't finished. You finished the first book of Wheel of Time.
Yes, I'm still very new to Wheel of Time, so that was really an educated guess on my part. And I apparently am incorrect. And maybe I will feel differently when I finish the series.
Maybe you'll still feel the same, though, too.
Yeah.
It could still be...
But it is really funny to think about, like, I would, without hesitation, say, yeah, they're similar enough that you would like them both. But that's just because I like them both for the same reason.
Yeah.
And other people would not agree. So, yeah.
At the same time, though, it's really fun to give recommendations, even if you don't know if they'll like it, because on the off chance that they do... Woohoo!
Somebody's gonna join the fandom.
Yeah. You feel so proud of yourself. You're like, yeah, I nailed that.
Although I don't know, I have that thing where sometimes I don't want to tell people things that I actually really like because they're not gonna like it in the same way I am.
You're one of those people.
I'm a gatekeeper. No, I'm just kidding. I would never. But I do like hesitate sometimes. I'm like, I know that we're not going to have the same experience and I hate that aspect of it. But also, I love it so much. I want you to get to enjoy it too. So
right.
I don't hesitate for long.
So thank you, everybody who has sent in all these questions. If you want, you can keep sending them in. We'll probably just sprinkle them in just like our normal end of episode discussions from now on. But thank you, everyone who is interested in catching up and listening to our 5-year anniversary questions.
Yeah, and I hope you guys enjoyed the little extra episode. It was fun.
Yeah, let us know what you think about it.
Yeah.
It's been 4 days since it released. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days.
Yeah.
3.5 days. So let us know what you think about the episode and let us know what you got going on in your life and let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys.